Hello, my lovelies, and welcome to the Heartland Hot Dish, where we come back to the table to rediscover your connection and meaning to our foods and the savory gateway to the culinary treasures of the Great Lake region. Join us as we rediscover the traditions and stories woven into the fabric of the Heartland cuisine. From the iconic dishes that define the Midwest to the hidden gems awaiting to be discovered, we'll take you on a mouthwatering journey through the diverse culinary landscape of the Great Lakes area. Get ready to indulge your senses and ignite your appetite as we explore the rich tapestry of flavors that make up the Heartland Hot Dish. I'm your host, Kieron Hales, and today we're diving into the art of the dining table. In a world filled with fast food and takeout and on-the-go meals, the simple act of sitting down and eating at the dining room table seems to have lost its significance. But there is more to just pulling up a chair. Let's get into this. So the dining table for me in the generations past was a place to come that was of stability. It never changed, no matter social change of generations past. Sadly, that bastion has completely been broken. I am a child of England and Sunday roast dinners where we would always eat at the table every single Sunday. I now have 2 kids, happily married. I get some Sundays off. Do we eat Sunday roast dinner as a group of people? Heck no, we don't. And today, what I wanted to talk with our friends in the room today was really about the whys and the whats, how we get people back to that table in the discussion, why it is important to come back to that table, what benefits it can have in today's social scene, and also the ability to slow down, to speed up. And I think that's a huge part of what we will hopefully talk today. In the room today, I've got wonderful Daniel, Marcy, and Aislinn. We all individually have our stories about our past at eating at a dining room table or not, or at the kitchen table. Daniel, if I start with you, what do you think has changed and why we're not at that table anymore?
That's a great question. That is a great question. I think part of the thing is about people's busy lives, and it's about priorities too, right? That to make this happen in our lives, we really have to make sure that it is a priority. And food in general, I think, has fallen off of that radar for most people. And I think it's not just about sitting down and eating meals. I think it's about food in general. That food in general is less important in people's lives. It's more fuel to keep us going. And because we are so much busier than we've ever been, we've got households that are married. You may have 2 people who are working. There's not that much time for life in between the work, which is why we're also seeing so much fast food and drive-through eating. Right? There's so many times I'm just driving the car on the road and I'm looking at the car next to me and I'm watching somebody wolfing down food. And not only is that taking away from meals with the family, but it's also taking away from the pleasures that one can take from sitting down and eating, and even on a more basic level, just tasting your food.
Yeah, I think when I think of my dilemma, I'm a chef. I've been a chef my entire life, and I get home and I've got no more than probably, I want to say, maybe 30 minutes to feed the kids before I come back, and we got to go to a swim practice, a meeting, something else. So they got 30 minutes in the door to feed them and get them out. Really what it all is about that meal prep piece and being able to see that larger place.
Chefs have historically been the worst.
Oh, we're
right?
terrible.
Because chefs don't stop to eat, because chefs are working around food. Right? They're eating out of what are those things called that you eat out of? What?
Deli containers.
Exactly.
Over a trash can.
Yes,
That's my entire life.
They're tasting as they cook.
Right. Maybe you get to squat down and eat out of your deli container.
Right.
I think that when I think about why chefs are like that, it's because we cook all day and we don't want to come home and cook. As a father, honestly, and on some real level, and I'm sorry, say this out in the world, is that I don't really want my son to do that as a career. It's been very hard. It is a hard job. I love what I do, but that not making it feel so special and amazing. I'm failing because one of my kids desperately wants to do it. And we do cook a lot at home more than eat at the table. We do a lot of cooking together. That magic is being instilled in him, which isn't always great. And I don't want to say that I don't want people in the industry it's just that struggle of having a family with it is incredibly hard. I'm incredibly lucky in where I am now in my career to be there, but it's been a harder journey. What about you, Marcy? Like that change of the way the social scene has happened for you and your family?
Absolutely. If you think about coming together as a family and eating and the significance of that, that sense of community and bonding has always been there, I think, throughout humanity. And, we can conjure up images of like the Last Supper, for example. So, whether or not you're Christian, you can identify. But just the evolution of like the ritual and the tradition around it itself, has had a lot of significance around just being able to join that time together. The dining room wasn't really something that was available until, the Industrial Revolution, when people started working outside the home. They couldn't get together until later in the evening. Then you had the Victorian era with its emphasis on the value of family, being at home, and home economics. The propaganda around the sanctity and security of the nuclear family during World War II in the 1950s. And there's thousands of photos when you think about it, of, like the family being together, and it's always around the dining room table, and mom has prepared this elaborate meal and is serving it with her pearls and curls, and the kids are freshly scrubbed with rosy cheeks, and everybody is smiling, and dad's sitting back like, wow, isn't life grand? And even during the 1980s, when I was growing up, we were still trying to foster that. We also had the Sunday roast, that was typically a midday meal, but during the week, it was very important to sit together as a family. Both my parents worked. My mother was a third shift nurse, so I remember her putting dinner on the table. She was in her nursing uniform, getting ready to go, and maybe being able to pop down and eat with us before she scurried out the door. But whatever time we had together, we still tried to get it where we could. And then later, like when she got sick, we set up her hospice room in the dining room, right? So there's your significance right there, your symbolism. And she died a few days after Thanksgiving, but it was very, very important for us to have that last Thanksgiving meal with her.
Yep.
And as you can imagine, as we're sitting there, my dad cooked, he had us all sit down. And I can only imagine what was going through our heads at the time, like what we were all thinking about. But it was a very, very quiet, very significant moment for us that, I will always remember and always carry with me. So now today, in our busy lives, and like that sense of family has definitely shifted, right? We have different definitions of family now. When you do have two people at home in these roles of parents, are they both working? And that whole work-life balance has shifted. And then, as we mentioned, the running of the kids around to different activities, the distractions of phones and digital media and television, and it becomes that much more difficult. But I don't think that we've lost the desire to still have that. And I know, like, for example, when I eat dinner with my boyfriend and his kids, they're given a choice.
Yep.
Do you want to eat in front of the television, or do you want to eat as a family? And they will always choose to sit down and be together as a family.
How old are they?
They are actually 15 and 10. So these are actually kind of difficult transitional ages, too.
Can I invite them over to my house to play my children and show them what it means to not sit in front of the TV?
No, exactly. And it's interestingly enough, it does depend on what we're eating, because if it's pizza, if it's Jets, we're in front of the television, right? But if it's dad and myself cooking and we've been in the kitchen for a few hours and we're preparing a home-cooked meal, then that draws them into the dining room, and they want to savor and enjoy that meal as a family and foster that sense of connection and enjoy that intention together.
I think one thing you said about like the history of eating at the dining table, there's a lot of history. You can go back to the Greeks, the Egyptians, and why we eat at tables and what that looks like. That Industrial Revolution, the Victorian time when the dining room became a dining room, when it was its own independence, it was a sense of wealth and growth. And that if you had one and you had the time to sit at a table and eat exclusively, that it gave you social status. And so the reason the working poor in a lot of England at the time had that dining room table was to give themselves a sense of social worth. And look at us, we can do this. I can stop. I can eat at a table. I'm not rushing out to the next thing. that was an incredibly powerful thing. I think it's still probably true today. Those of us who are working so hard, we don't have the time to. Those of you who have a bit more space tend to eat at that dining room table. I said in my piece, I was chatting to somebody before we came in here about the dining room table. It's where we put our post. It's where the jackets get thrown. It's where we pack the kids' school lunches. It gets used on the weekends, on a Friday and a Saturday and a Sunday. That's it. That social need of that space is really important. We also talked before we started recording, because we were both going to talk about hospice care, because it's one of the subjects we want to talk about in the future, about that final meal. My mother was in the same place. That last meal was about a family meal. We were in hospice and weren't at home, and what she wanted was a Sunday roast dinner, and she could only take liquids. And so the reason I love sauces and gravies to this day is what I made was roast dinner in one sauce. And like, it was an incredibly difficult challenge to not make one flavor beat the other in there. But we all sat around her bed as though it was a dining room table. And I think that that sense of that place that my mother spent a lot of her time is important. I think when we look at that social aspect of why that dining room table was there and why it still is important, to see that there's you said 10 and 13?
10 and 15.
15. Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Because my kids don't get technology Monday through Friday. They don't get the opportunity to sit in front of the TV, and we still struggle to get them. We are usually at a kitchen island, what it is. Aislinn, how about you? As far as like your side of the social journey on the dining room table?
Yeah, I'm kind of on the complete opposite side of the spectrum in that I'm a single person that lives alone. So I'm generally eating over the sink in the kitchen at 10:30 at night when I get home from work.
Living the best chef's life
Right,
ever.
exactly. Surviving off cheese scraps during the day and then eating over the sink at night is where I am most of the time. But it is really not the most healthy thing in the world, mentally or physically, to be doing that all of the time. But now it's to the point where sitting down and eating with people is intimate to me, where it means a lot more to sit down and eat with another person now. When I'm at someone's house or I'm out getting dinner with someone and we sit down at a table to eat, it's a totally different experience for me now that I'm just not used to sitting around a dining table and eating.
Do you find that that's, I don't know how much you eat out, but like the eat out culture of America versus Europe of all as much. I mean, it's sometimes 5 nights a week for a lot of Americans who will choose to eat out, and it can be fast food and not something else. You are getting that dining room experience. It just happens to not be in your house and you're at a table with other people and sitting there. There is something interesting about like that difference over here than sitting at your own table. Do you eat out to have that experience, or is it something when you're at friends' meals?
It's more so with friends, with family, with people around me. I actually don't eat at restaurants very often. Just to say the line, the pandemic kind of changed everything in that aspect. But I don't eat at restaurants very often. If I do eat out at a restaurant, it's to pick up food and go home with it. I'm generally eating at home alone or with a friend somewhere. But I grew up very much in the culture of you sit down to eat dinner with your family. You sit down as a group together, and that's where you eat dinner. There's no distractions. You have dinner together.
When you grew up in that experience, was that 5 nights a week, 7 nights a week? Was that every day?
Single day. Every single meal we had, eating at the table together.
Breakfast, lunch, and dinners?
Not breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Mostly just dinner, because
Just
we
dinners.
all, school, work, all that kind of thing.
We always had to
Dinner.
have breakfast at the dining room table, which was the weirdest experience. My mother was an incredible cook, amazing cook. And so breakfast was not cereal in our house. It was like she was up for 3 hours before making some elaborate thing that I don't even know why I didn't pay attention to it back then, because I don't know how. Like, I'm up at 5:30 every day with the kids, and I don't know how you get up 2 hours earlier than that to do all of what my mother did around the table. Daniel, when we look at like that family dynamic that has changed, there is also, as Aislinn said, that person who's eating alone at that table, right? And that social isolation that the pandemic's definitely created, but also the way we've gone, that we live in that digital world. Is there anything that can be done to make that dining room become more important? Because we're still all buying our houses. We've still all got that table somewhere in our house.
I think, no matter who you are, there's still an opportunity for people to cook for themselves and to be able to enjoy food and celebrate in food and the experience of eating. It does take time. It does take some prioritization of this. But, I will find myself sometimes, and I come from a family today, where we still prioritize cooking. In fact, tonight we've got a family cooking project that's already on the books, and one of the ways that we're doing this is that we're scheduling it. We're thinking about, how do we make this happen, and we're actually putting it on our schedules to make cooking happen together. But you can also do this if you are on your own and if you make this the priority, right? That you can, and I will do this, as I was saying, I will do this sometimes for myself when my wife has got a late night meeting and the kid is away doing whatever, I will find myself at home, but I will still cook something simple. And sometimes I actually like it better. I love my family, but everyone has different tastes. And I think this is sometimes one of those things that is a drawback and, hinders people from cooking with their families or for their families is, there's been all this, idea of, people can get what they want all the time. And, that's become a certain expectation. And the idea of meeting with your family and sharing a meal where you may like some of the things, but may not like others, right, is a growth experience. But, but it's fun to cook for yourself because then you can just find the things that you love. So when I'm by myself, I can have things like tinned fish that the rest of the family just won't let me eat in their presence. Or I can make kimchi fried rice, which again, is very aromatic, and and the rest of the family will come back and they said, "You had kimchi fried rice, didn't you?" And it's like, well, I was all alone, and it's a delightful experience. And I will sometimes fall into the trap of taking those meals and eating them standing up in the kitchen, but it's better to take them to the table. Historically, people have blessed their meals, right? When people were more religious, they would sit and they would say grace or hamotzi or barucha. And I think in today's modern age, where we've lived in this Instagram culture, right? People are taking pictures of their food, and I will sometimes do that. And and I know that there are some people who bristle at the idea of taking pictures of your food, but it is a moment to sort of stop and reflect, appreciate the beauty of how something looks, before you start to just go in and eat it. So for me, I think it's kind of a more modern, interpretation of that giving thanks before starting to eat, and which helps to bring more enjoyment to your food.
Yeah, I think when you talk about that conversation of planning meals, what is the dish tonight?
Tonight, we're going to have some fried tofu and string beans in a green coconut curry sauce over rice.
Nice. Did you marinate the tofu?
That will happen a la minute before, so it will get pressed between a couple of plates with some heavy things on it to expel the liquid, and then I will slice it up, and it will go in some soy sauce and some sesame oil, and we'll see what else is around.
Very cool. So, sorry, needed to know. I think for us is the similar thing. If it's planned, like I've got most nights, at least 4 nights of the week with my kids, I've got 30 minutes to feed them before they are onto an activity. That means everything's pre-planning. I'm lucky I'm a chef. I live in that world where we get to do that. I think for somebody who's alone, what that is that knowing that you're going to take that time. And it's about slowing down the speed up to enjoy it, but also it is a process of learning and being part of your day. With me, with the kids, when we make homemade pasta at home, it isn't about eating better. It's about being together and doing that work. And I think when I was alone, which I definitely love when my house is empty and I get to cook my own things. I live in a world where I usually cook 4 separate meals in our house because no one eats the same thing. Is that ability to, when you're cooking alone, to really get quite elaborate and have a lot of fun, relatively low cost because you're cooking for one, and have that fun at the table. I don't know how many of you still have like family china. Do you all have like a grandparents or a mother's or like wedding china from a previous generation or your generation? Did you get those?
We're eating off that tonight with the good silver.
Oh, nice. Then the good silver comes out.
It was under. It doesn't come out. It was under the bed for a decade or more, and we realized that was just dumb. There was never any occasion that was worth breaking it out for, so we're just going to use it every day.
Ashlyn, what about you? You got some family china?
Man, I've got the family silverware. I have a whole
Break it out
silverware
tonight.
set. Came
Pull her
from my great grandmother, and it's my favorite thing in the entire world. I'm never buying another silverware set unless I lose all the pieces.
It's for a random, like, I work out at Corman Farms and we do weddings and events. And for us, we brought my grandparents and great-grandparents china to the farm to use it every day. I couldn't deal with it not doing anything. We surely kept a little bit at home that's safe, but it just sitting in a cupboard and never coming out was kind of sad. And we've broken pieces. They've got lost. They've got chipped. But the reality of them being used is a much happier place than them sitting in the cupboard. What about you, Marcy?
I definitely have some china that's been passed down. No, I don't use it as often. I don't get as fancy with it unless it's more of a special occasion, like a holiday. But it is one of those things where I do think it is part of the tradition and the ritual, and harkens back to, like, if you think about the Medici family and their influence on just introducing the fork to France and how that altered culinary history.
Can we do a whole thing about a fork? Because that would be really good. The introduction of the fork, like an actual fork, was quite an interesting change in the way we eat. That'd be a really good one. I don't know about Midwest and how we tie it back to us. We could totally figure out a nice hook into that. So with that china, I don't know about you, but like, so I've got my mother's grandparents and great-grandparents china, but then I've got that everyday china that we had. Like we had Denby, and it sounds expensive. Everything British kind of gives that tone, but it was like our everyday china. I have more reverence for that than our posh china. So my mum's blue Denby that we would literally eat off every night is way more locked up in a cabinet and kept safe on a daily basis. There's a lot less of it because I was a child and I broke a lot of it in my mother's times. But like the reality is that has a lot more memories because the family expensive china, like everyone else, came out on those special occasions. I like that now it gets like a good run every day, and that the kids, at least for me, I'm hoping will want then to have that same reverence I have for it, that, oh, this was when we were doing this thing or that. Okay. So I guess the next thing about like the family table for me, when I think about how we use it and how you get people back to that table, is making it meaningful every single day. And I think that that's the hard piece, because wanting to be at the table or being at the table and making it special to be there, even if it's for 30 minutes before you run out to a swim practice, I think that is our job, to make that clear to those listening, to our families when we go back to them, and what that table signifies, that it's not dinner, it's togetherness. I mean, I used to have to share. You ask my kids what they did at school. It's as though they didn't go to school for their entire day. But you had to like give a report of your day and everything when I was a child. What are your thoughts about like how to get people there, even past the food, but what the reverence of that table and that room? Because we've all got those rooms and they don't get the use. I mean, maybe I'll post one on the website of what my dining room table looked like pre coming here, because there's a lot of posts on there right now.
Well, I think for me, right, life is what happens in between meetings, right? This is the stuff of life, right? This is the meaningful part, right? And it doesn't necessarily feel meaningful because you're just, sitting down to eat or not, right? This is, just a meal, but it isn't, right? It is more. So even, and not every day is going to have these groundbreaking conversations. You're not going to, sometimes it will just be what was the best thing about your day or what was the worst thing about your day. And that's what we like to do around our table. We like to, say a good thing and a bad thing about our days. And we go around and we share those. It's a little bit less pressure than having to report on the day. And frankly, I don't really want to hear all of the details of my children's.
Anything, the details.
But by having these gatherings and by having, and by establishing this communication and this is family time, right? You are forming this community. It creates this space where conversations can happen, right? So that if somebody does have something meaningful to say, right? One of our dinner table conversations was when my oldest kid told us that they were non-binary, right? And that was a really big thing. But we had a space that we created because we've been working on this for a long time. My oldest is now 19 years old, and and I think for most of their life, we've been prioritizing these family meals, and they don't happen every night, but they happen most days of the week. And and by doing this and by creating these spaces, we have the opportunity to have these conversations. And and that's just one example of some of the many conversations that can come.
Yeah, when I think about like why we're at the table, I definitely need the report. For me, that's like the essential thing of sitting there. One of my boys, he was a pandemic kid of learning to read. He was in first grade when we started, so he missed that whole like reading in school, and he was reading over the iPad, and so he's struggled with reading. And we go to the dining room table as that place. It's created some feelings of like it's a place of punishment because he has to sit there. But now it's a kind of a place of victory, as now it has changed over. I think for us, I mean, we have a table that probably seats 8, and we use half of it for dinner, and it's pretty clear. The other half is a awful mess. When I think of like the why we're at that table, isn't just about the conversation, but it's about what we just did, and usually it's about something we've cooked. And so when Daniel talks about like that pre-making a meal and knowing what's coming up, we've already cooked the rice the day before, so we can do the stir fry. We've already got the pasta dough ready, or the pizza dough's been blind baked the night before. So usually when we get back from our sporting event, we're setting up the next day and it's pre-planned. I think what I've enjoyed more of the mechanism of that dining room table and being at the table when we do it, and I'm not as well versed as Daniel on a regular basis, is that clearing of the table. Like, there's something about the sitting in front of the TV or sitting in our living room, and the kids do not clean up very effectively. If they do, there's a plate I didn't see where it was. Whereas being asked to be excused and being at, like, taking the time to slow down and know your actions of what they are. My boys are a little younger, and so being able to give them that regimented feel of what that's happening and that beat has seemed really important. What about you, Marcy?
I think it's a sense of inclusiveness, and that's what becomes important. Again, like in previous generations, there was a sense of propriety and certain roles being filled, by mom, dad, and the kids, and that carried over to the table and how we were expected to act and speak. Growing up, we did absolutely have a sense of, yes, this was sharing time, but respect. We don't interrupt each other. There's no bickering, so on and so forth. And so maybe just being a little bit more relaxed, as Daniel was saying, like creating a safe space. This is a time to be open, but also maybe even is not just at the table, but how are we involved in the preparation of the meal, and coming back to the whole work-life balance, where it's not falling on one person, but everybody is involved maybe in cooking or setting the table or just leading up to it. So we're feeling like, even if there's not a designated role, but we're still doing this as a family, and, kind of making sure that, that timeline in between the running around of activities and homework and everything else is still, spread out amongst everybody, so it doesn't just fall on one head. And then I feel like, as a child, you definitely feel like you're doing something of importance. There's a lot more like significance behind it, and then that can carry over into the conversation itself and the enjoyment of the meal because you had a hand in helping with it.
Oh, when my kids get to like put name tags in front of the spots, sometimes they'll do it randomly. On a day though, there's nothing magical, nothing important, nothing special, and they'll put little name tags and they set it. When you think about the 4 real big elements, it's like set the dining room table. You've got to cook the meal, you got to clear the dining room table, and you got to do the dishes. No one wants to do the dishes, especially if I've cooked. The reality is, no one. I cook at home like I cook at work. Like I've got 3 people in the dish tank trying to tidy up after me on a minute-to-minute basis. I think that sense of achievement when the kids have made the meal or be part of it is so different when we're sitting and eating. And that's the bit where it's understanding what it is. I have one of my kids is a terrible, and I shouldn't say terrible, but he really is a terrible eater, doesn't eat that many things. Knowing what's in it and cooking it with him, even if he's still not going to eat it at the end, there is something still enjoyable about that journey. Like sometimes he'll have a different meal, but he will have participated in the rest of what we're eating together as a family.
Right. And I think you raised an interesting point, right, about, teaching, especially as a parent, that these can be real teaching opportunities, right? Teaching kids how to cook. One of the things I've taught my youngest is that cooking is cleaning. So that if you're going to be cooking, you're actually doing the dishes yourself because you've made the mess and you're cleaning it up.
I was sick that day at school. I didn't get that class.
But also, to Marcy's point, right? It's also about teaching table manners. How to use a fork. I've seen my kids, grasp a fork like it's a dagger, and it's like, no. Let's work on this. And they were younger at the time. They're better now. But it gives you a chance to to check in with your family to see how their progress is going. And I also want to make the argument too for family dinner being a great chance to teach early math. Because when you're doing things like sharing plates of food, or you're going into the kitchen and there are 4 people and there are and there's a pot worth of food, then you're going to take we instruct the kids. It's like you can take as much as you can, making sure that there's enough for everybody else. And you watch the gears in their brain going, and you're not talking about it as fractions, but they're learning fractions. They're learning what a quarter of something is, and they get an intuitive sense for this, which will help prepare them for math, and then they can go to the Ivy League and be accountants or whatever, whatever makes money, and it will give them plenty of time for dinners in the future.
You happily make me fall off my chair because that's my entire life of my kids. Is everything is math. I'm not your English major. The fact that I have to edit this or write a script for this is scary for everyone listening at a daily basis. But like for us, for the kids, and that ability to understand the math of the cooking, the clearing. Teaching them full hands in, full hands out. Like, why are you going to make 6 trips? Make 1 really good trip. The other bit for, like, when I look at my kids and they're at the table or they're clearing the table, understanding that we have stopped and that we're together. So much of our life is passing. So much of those opportunities to look each other in the eye and sit at the table seems so swift. And we do a lot of fun things with our kids. I mean, the fact that we do so many activities but do we often sit across from each other and look each other in the eye and just appreciate each other for being there? I think that's a lot of the win that I feel from it, and trying to remember those moments. Yeah, Marcy?
Happy Pi Day, by the way, speaking of math.
Yeah, Pi Day.
So, have you guys seen The Bear?
I can't do it.
You can't do it. Okay.
My wife, okay, I know this has got nothing to do with this. My wife was talking to somebody about The Bear, and she was like, oh, it's great. You got to go watch The Bear. And I'm like, Joni, we could just have a conversation. This has been my life for 27 years. Like, do you want some stories? Because I guarantee I've got better than The Bear, and it was my life. And but Joni knows very little about my past, I feel like, where it's been. Sorry, go for the Bear story.
Yeah. No, I feel the same way watching this, having a culinary background and worked in the kitchen. I'm like, well, I can definitely relate, and I have some better stories. However, there is this one episode of The Bear where they're having a Christmas family meal. It's the Feast of the Seven Fishes, and it's a big Italian family. The mom is, spent all day preparing this. Everybody's getting increasingly drunker, and things start to fall apart. It's complete chaos ensues. Everybody starts fighting. Everything's a mess, and there is this one scene where somebody's got a fork, and he's threatening somebody with it. And so the significance of the fork is just cracking me up because it's making me think about this episode. What's interesting about it, and I won't spoil it for you, Kieron, if you do want to watch it, and the culmination of it.
You can go ahead and spoil it.
Okay, the mom drives a car through the side of the garage into the dining room and
now I might watch it.
Destroys everything. Anyway, so following up from this, after watching this for the first time, I ended up talking to a lot of people who watched this show and asked them about their reaction to this episode. I'm just really curious, like, as somebody who grew up, dining, there's always this sense of propriety at the dining room table, how they felt about it. And so I got some very different mixed reviews, and some people were like, oh, wow, it was actually kind of relief, because when I was growing up, it was always just like there's a lot of pressure to behave a certain way at the table. So, but, sometimes I was mad at my sister, and I was kicking our shins, and sometimes like some things were uttered under our breath and like while our mouths were full, and so to actually see that kind of unfold on the screen, like that complete chaos, and just let it fly. I think for some people they kind of felt relieved. It didn't happen to us, but it can actually happen. And then I did get some other reviews where people said like, well, I was actually kind of offended by it, and I stopped watching the show after that because it was so important for us to have such, a nice, like, time together, as a family. So it's just kind of interesting how I feel like it really speaks to, again, this kind of pressure that we have on ourselves, and to make sure, that we're not putting so much pressure on the kids, on ourselves, to make sure that like this is a perfect experience. But again, just having like that safe, comfortable space with each other.
I just love that forks have taken over this conversation.
Right.
So when Daniel was talking, now you saying about the forks, the number of people that will come and work at the farm, and we set a lot of tables, who do not know the fork goes on the left, hurts my brain, right? Like, my sister, I was a music kid. I was a classically trained bassoonist, and my sister was a very smart, intellectual kid, and she did finishing school. I know it sounds very posh. I promise I come from a countryside of nowhere. But she did finishing school, and it teaches you all the etiquette and different things. The fact that most people haven't sat at a table enough to know the fork is on the left is kind of very strange to me. And like when we talk about the skills you learn at the table, I don't even know that we're going to say them all because they all seem so obvious to us. But there is a generation of children growing up not knowing some basic skills of eating at a table, sitting at a table, having a conversation, having small talk. And them having that is going to change their lives later if they have it. Like being able to sit across a conference room and having meaningful conversation with someone will come from the dining room table more than it's going to come from other aspects of their lives. But the forks are going to be a thing apparently.
Well, Marcy said something else that really resonated with me that I would like listeners to really just sort of take a moment and hear again. And you didn't say it exactly in this way, but what I heard was, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good when it comes to making dinners at home and getting around the table. That it doesn't matter if you're going to actually make something from scratch or if you're going to take a box of macaroni and cheese off of the shelf, right? It's not about the food, it's about the gathering, and it's about spending that time. So whatever it is that you can do, even if, I would go as far to say, even if it's takeout, and I hate takeout. I despise
We
it.
will plate McDonald's when grandma buys it, and we will get china out. It's the most bizarre thing of wasting china because you got to wash it, but we will plate McDonald's in our house.
Right. So that's an important. I'm glad that you brought that up.
It's interesting too because, we did touch on the pandemic earlier and how with COVID, a lot of us had more time at home to get back into that preparation of the meal and dining together. And you kind of did see a shift back to that. And now that we're back into the workforce again and actually, going back into, back to work, you see that pressure building up again, to try to get back to that and try to preserve that. So, even if you are just picking up like a family meal from Zingerman's Roadhouse, right? From McDonald's, wherever, grabbing a pizza, and maybe not giving the kids a choice to eat the pizza in front of the TV, maybe saying, okay, let's get out Grandma's china and let's pull up a chair.
Yeah, I think with the kids, the perfect thing is, I think my lovely wife, Joni, I hope she's listening, gets really upset if the kids, somehow there's a toy on the table because we haven't cleared the table fully, and then they start bickering or playing with a toy. And I'm like, we're sat at a table and there's nothing turned on. Like, this is still a win. Let's just, they can play with the random piece of plastic and I'm all good. Or like, they're exchanging the thing they don't want on their plate with the other child. I'm like, all good. I can move on in that world. I do think that like getting a takeout meal and plating it and sitting and eating is an interesting aspect. I keep thinking of for Aislinn when you're at home by yourself. Is there ever a sense of, I don't even mean friends, but it's that when I remember eating pre-kids, I always call it BC, before the children, maybe even before marriage, BM, before marriage, that I would have people over because I wanted to share that excitement of whatever it was. And I think the social aspect of our world has disencouraged us to do that, or the fear of the scare of somebody else and like not knowing somebody, but the opportunity there, the multicultural experience of having that food they brought versus the food you brought, that social aspect is so good. I love potlucks for that. If you get a really good potluck where you can be like, why did you bring that? Tell me about grandma and why she made that really interesting dressing is usually how that's what happens in my wife's extended family. They always have some like Gigi's dressing. And I'm like, how did Gigi make this? I feel like Gigi found this on the back of a magazine, and you've all now lived with it for 40 years. It's still not good, but you've embraced bad Gigi's thing. So actually, I don't know, like, because thinking back to that time, I was a chef. It was my life to want people in and share, and I wanted that piece. For you, is that something that's like an interest of being able to get back to that, to use the table? Like, do you have a dining room? I know this sounds silly. Do we all have dining room tables and dining rooms?
Yeah, I do.
I know it sounds silly. Like, I know, I don't think I asked everyone. I mean, do you have a dedicated room as well?
Oh, yes.
Yep. Marcy?
In my tiny apartment, no.
Look at that.
So I do have a counter.
Yep. Cool. Aislinn, go for it. Sorry.
Yeah, as we're all talking about this, I was kind of reflecting on it's really the gathering that we're all coming back to, and not necessarily the dining table itself, but just the gathering with other humans and talking about your day, talking about the food, and really the food that brings us all together. And that's kind of the thing I just keep going back to, is thinking about how many great conversations that I've had just sitting on someone's couch eating off an ottoman, just because we're sharing food together and we have great things to talk about while we're sharing food.
Yeah.
A lot of it's just the social aspect of gathering with someone and eating together.
Yeah, we've turned it into, my wife's turned it into porch wine with all the mums. When the kids are at activity, porch wine takes place, and really porch wine is like eating at the table. To be clear, it's not always outside, nor is it just wine, but it feels like that's become our social aspect of that piece of what it is.
Right. But Aislinn also raised a really great point, because just because you may not have a dining room table doesn't prevent you from gathering around to eat and gathering around to share a meal. I love the idea of doing it around an ottoman.
I've just got the fear of my children spilling things all over my couch.
Well, I kind of remember, like, in my 20s, gathering around ottomans and other sorts of like little coffee tables, or sort of kneeling around whatever sort of space in my friends' apartments that we could do to share food.
I just remember as a kid, if we were eating anywhere but the dining room table, I don't think we ate very many places. Like, it was a rare occasion we were allowed to sit in front of the TV. Food was not allowed in rooms. Did we sneak it in there? 100%. But like, if there were chips on the floor, you got in a lot of trouble. Let alone a liquid that was spilled on something would be a different thing. That's not the case anymore. In our house, it goes everywhere. It's like shoes off at the door is one of the last things that are left in our house that isn't being broken on a regular basis. We're coming to the end of today's discussion at the dining table. I just wonder if anyone's got any like last thoughts, some best practices. There are those listening, and I think Daniel said it from Marcy's piece, that trying to not go for perfect. Get your way to the table, get your way to have that conversation, and not the dining room table. It doesn't need to be it, but where you have communally eaten with somebody, where you've looked them in the eye, you've had that conversation. I think I've done it with my sister. She lives down in Vermont, and we will web chat while I'm cooking something my mum made. It is just as meaningful for me to have that conversation. There aren't many people to have conversations with about my mum's culinary past, and so that's a really magical moment, and we will do it over the phone. Anyone's got any last thoughts on all of it?
I've got one quick thing, and that's just the dining. Like I said before, the dining table is kind of what you make it, and I think a lot of, at least personally, the not sitting at the dining table, it comes from just kind of negative experiences as a kid, being forced to sit at the dining table, or this is what we have to do, this is where we have to eat and what we have to talk about. But you can make that whatever you want it to be. The dining table can look like anything for anyone.
Are you saying I'm going to make my kids hate it as much as I did for a while? Oh my God, I'm my parents again. Oh, it's gone dark. Go for it, Marcy.
Yeah, Aislinn, I think the importance there being when you're coming together, it's a positive, uplifting experience. So making it a place of laughter, literally until tears are coming out your eyes, and telling stories, sharing memories, just making it all around like a joyful place to be, and then, your kids and yourself, you can take that with you, and hopefully your kids down the road will have that experience as well with their own.
Right. My whole thing is that that we're humans, right? And as such, for better or for worse, we have to eat, right? And if we're lucky, we get to have 3 meals a day. And these are these are obligations. They're things that we need to keep moving and living. But they're also these incredible opportunities for us. Every meal that we have is a chance for us to slow down, to increase our enjoyment and appreciation of food and of life. And I would just really encourage folks who are listening to try to take advantage of those opportunities as much as they can. Ideally with some other people, that would be great. But even if it's just by yourself, right? We have all of this beautiful enjoyment in the world. There's a lot of negativity that's around. I feel every little bit of joy that we can squeeze out of life these days is time well spent.
I think that really brings us home. I think that for me, coming from this, from everyone that's listening, is that side of trying to take joy from it, not turn it into that bad memory of our childhood, of being at the table or slowing down to eat together, to look each other in the eye and take a moment to be together, be it at the table, be it at the kitchen counter, even in front of that TV, as long as she's off, as long as that TV gets turned off. Well, I'd like to say thank you to everyone. So thank you, Daniel, Marcy, Aislinn. I just really appreciate everyone being here to have the discussion. I appreciate you all for listening. I hope you got inspired. I hope you got inspired to come back to the table, albeit whatever table you'd like to. Go have that meal, slow down, take that 30, 40 minutes, put everything else aside. It's going to bring you some joy. Join us next for our next discussion. Thank you so much for joining us at the Heartland Hot Dish. Have a lovely day.